After 15 long and highly anticipated years, the third installment in the Tron cinematic series gains another entry with Tron Ares, directed by Joachim Roning. With fans of Tron rejoicing that something was even being created, many were skeptical that this film would deliver a satisfying viewing experience, with most of the disdain stemming from sequel fatigue and the choice of casting for its main star, Jared Leto. As someone who is also beguiled by these cinematic woes, let's get into why I thought Tron Ares was actually kind of psychotically good. Full disclosure, my opinions and thoughts on the film are 100% influenced by the fact that I intentionally saw this film in 4DX 3D. I knew what I wanted out of a Tron film were most likely not going to be delivered, whether it was the acting or the action, but I knew if I was going to see this film, the only way to truly watch it would be to experience it visually, musically, and physically as if I were thrown out of the grid and into the real world. Of course, going into the film, I knew that it was being critically panned and that I shouldn't be expecting, quote-unquote, the next great action film. Expectations were also high due in part to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross having penned the soundtrack to the film, and for the first time in their scoring career were credited as Nine Inch Nails. And as a huge Nine Inch Nails fan, this was the major draw for me to see Tron Ares. I am a firm believer that the 4DX experience can turn a mid-film into a galvanizing adventure by immersing you more into the film's world than just solely through sound and vision. For example, one of my favorite movie experiences was when I saw James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water in 4DX, which was my first 4DX experience. I knew in our age of sequels and remakes that The Way of Water could not live up to the splendor of the original Avatar, but experiencing the motions and the elements like water being splashed on you in relevant moments truly elevated the film in ways that sitting motionless could not otherwise convey. I feel that watching this movie for the first time normally would not have created the impact upon me like the 4DX experience did. It is for this same exact reason why I would go out of my way to watch a film like Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer as it was intended, on a 70mm print on an IMAX screen. During its theatrical run, I saw Oppenheimer first on opening night at Grauman's Chinese Theater in 70mm, and then a second time closer to Oscar season at a regular-sized screen on digital. And I'll let you guess which was the superior viewing experience. With the expanding variety of amazing viewing choices, it is more difficult to leave the theater after having been further dropped into the suspension of disbelief, which is the core of the magic of movies. First and foremost, let's get into the 4DX 3D experience. This movie was non-stop action from start to finish. Even in quieter moments of the film without excessive movements were filled with wonder and anticipation. The chairs rocked with the hand-to-hand fighting sequences. The chairs flailed about with the motorbikes, the single flyer jets, the Batmobile-like tanks, the giant robots reminiscent of mecha anime. All of these crazy futuristic military-grade vehicles created such an immersive ride that it was hard to shake for hours, even days after the viewing experience. It was difficult to hide my fascination with how crazy it was when discussing the movie with others. I feel like I should watch the film in IMAX or a regular screen to compare the viewing versions and see if the film still holds up. But seeing it again, I would just be craving the sea of seats moving alongside the movie. There was a specific part of the movie where the 3D printed tech tank had one of its wheels blown off, and it was thrown off course and crashed hard, and everybody in the theater was literally thrown out of our seats. It was jaw-dropping and funny, really. We all collectively giggled because it was just so crazy to experience. I understand in hyping up Tron Ares and specifically 4DX viewing that I am upholding Martin Scorsese's assertion that most movies today are essentially just roller coaster rides. I am literally describing this movie as a roller coaster ride and acknowledging it as such. 4DX 3D transmutes what is normally constituted just as sound and vision into a fully fleshed simulation of that movie. And what better encapsulates this than the Tron franchise? The 4DX experience was made for movies like Tron to shine. In the end, I do concur with Scorsese, but I also wouldn't let these ideas prohibit me from watching something I might enjoy. And I say this as someone who loves watching art house films, classic films, and who hasn't watched nearly any of the Marvel movies, which Scorsese was essentially throwing shade at. The industrial sonic wasteland created by Nine Inch Nails has been living rent-free in my head since viewing the film. I didn't listen to the soundtrack before watching the film because I wanted fresh ears to experience the music loud and abrasively in the theaters. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have time and time again scored impeccable soundtracks, won Oscars for their scoring, and are highly sought after for film projects. To put it simply, Nine Inch Nails makes music that is cinematic. Their soundtrack music is so genius and plays thematically very well that you could plug it into other film projects and have it shine even brighter. My favorite example of this is Steven Soderbergh utilizing the entire Social Network score set to a black and white version of Steven Spielberg's The Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's so enjoyable to watch and works on so many levels. And here's why Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross upped their game for Tron Ares. Not only did they have to outdo themselves in their body of work, but they had to deliver a soundtrack following in the footsteps of Tron Legacy's soundtrack composed by Daft Punk. Daft Punk's scoring is beloved by fans and was a huge part in the film being as successful as it was. Songs like End of Line and Derezzed still sound so fresh and exciting over 15 years after its release. Daft Punk is timeless and delivered successfully for Tron Legacy. I remember seeing Tron Legacy in theaters when I was in high school, and just like Tron Ares, I thought it was very cool and exciting, despite it being critically panned as well. Fans of the Legacy soundtrack will welcome Nine Inch Nails' foray into the Tron universe, especially with tracks like In It and Shadow Over Me, which thematically build upon Daft Punk's End of Line. Other tracks like Infiltrator and As Alive As You Need Me to Be are instant bangers and should be staples of each of their concerts moving forward. And of course, in true Reznor and Ross fashion, most of the tracks are hauntingly beautiful and somber, and truly captivate the now frail line distinguishing between a cold, soulless techno-reality and the plight of retaining humanity in such digital times. To give credit where credit is due, this film would not exist without Jared Leto. As a producer of the film and as a fan of Tron since childhood, it's been a passion project of Leto in the making for almost a decade. Naturally, him starring in the film is a dream come true for his inner child. In real life and online, his casting has been controversial, especially concerning his inclusion in other franchises like Marvel and DC universes, how commercially unviable those were, and how his involvement potentially led those franchises losing serious steam. Now, this might be a controversial take, but as someone who doesn't care too much for either Leto's acting nor him personally, I thought he actually was a very good fit for this. When I think of his acting, I do think of something robotic trying to glean what it's like actually being a human. In that sense, his casting is ideal, and I think it worked for the film. Nothing spectacular should be expected from him once you're watching the film, though. Overall, one should not have high expectations from the acting and the performances in this film. Arguably, the only objectively good performance is from Gillian Anderson with her pseudo-British accent, portraying the antagonist's apprehensive yet wise mother. And of course, what would a Tron movie be without an appearance by the impeccable Jeff Bridges? His brief role serves as a helper to Ares after his descent into the original and outdated grid in order to return from the abyss of ancient tech back into the real world with the gift of permanence. Bridges Flynn unfortunately has too little screen time, but his presence in the film is a welcome one and will satisfy fans of the franchise. What I also enjoyed about Tron Ares is that the previous franchise entries concerned itself with creating digital worlds and our immersion into them, which kind of parallels how we've created digital spaces for ourselves to exist in, like in online chat rooms, multiplayer video games, or social media. And Tron Ares flips this scenario. Essentially, the movie's premise mirrors our current predicament with the advancements of AI. No longer are we just inserting ourselves into the digital world, but we are allowing artificial intelligence ridiculous amounts of agency to reflect back into our world. As the main villain and architect of this technology claims in the movie, well, folks, we're not going there. They are coming here. No longer are we utilizing computers and technology to create things, but we are allowing computers and technology to create for us and instead of us. Like in the movie, they are following their complex programs and regurgitating to us what its directive was. I think it's great that we get a Tron film dealing with the inherent dangers of AI in 2025, because a main driver of the plot has to deal with utilizing a complex fusion of AI and 3D printing for military purposes and create an infinite army. It's fitting and current to our present predicament. Ultimately, I am not a fan of AI. I refuse to create using it, which is why this channel favors analog media and analog tools. And of course, it is very concerning how AI will be implemented for killing and for war. I'm glad that even just a few years into AI's mass adoption that we are getting films even just touching upon the subject. But I think the film's final statement on AI, which I won't go into to not spoil the film for you, but I would say it's a bit disingenuous. The film's main conflict highlights artificial intelligence's dangers with these 3D printed soldiers going berserk, but ends on an inspiring note in how possibly AI can be good or used for good. I don't trust where these things are heading, and I don't trust those who are developing such technologies, but putting all the real-world consequences aside, it was a decent plot point to initiate the conflict and getting the story going. Another aspect of the film I found interesting was Ares' desire for permanence and the inherent paradox of life and death that comes with it. Ares, like other iterations that find themselves manifested in the real world, have 29 minutes before they collapse and are de-resed, which is a physical death for that program. It interests me because they can be printed from scratch again with intact memories leading up to being de-resed and start anew. In a sense, they already have some form of immortality and permanence. Won't divulge too much from the plot, but Ares begins to desire permanence after experiencing sensations beyond words, such as rain falling upon his skin, and after scanning the main protagonist Eve's entire digital footprint, which in 2025 amounts to essentially her whole life documented through her and her family's social media, in addition to press articles about her tech career. Witnessing Eve losing her sister, her impermanence and humanity, propels Ares in the conflict forward. I found these plot points interesting because in desiring permanence beyond 29 minutes, Ares ultimately and ironically has to accept a true permanent death without the hope of being reprinted. This scenario is a great literal interpretation of Friedrich Nietzsche's theory of recurrence, which in a nutshell postulates the idea that if you had an infinite amount of simultaneous lives, would you be doing what you are doing right this second? Side note, in a nutshell was humorously uttered by Ares a few times in the film in an effort to have more of a human personality, and to show he's picking up on metaphors that binary code probably couldn't literally decipher. Nietzsche's theory of an infinite amount of lives, of an infinite variability, leads to his idea of amor fati, Latin for the love of one's fate. The life you're living right now and the actions you are taking are the ultimate expression of you and your will. These ideas were explored by our cyber heroes and villains who dealt with faithfully executing their programs by the master controller, and whether their actions were repeated throughout their various reprinted lives, or if they took decisive action to fill their program in a way that they saw fit. I greatly enjoyed Tron Ares. Every conversation I've had about the film has drawn a surprised remark when I describe how cool the film was. The common response of, "Really?" mainly stems from the unfavorable casting. People I've recommended this film to and who saw the film also thought it was pretty awesome, despite it being kind of a straightforward, basic Hollywood plot and film. In my conversations, we have all agreed that the music truly is the saving grace to the movie. This is a film to experience the joy of watching movies more so than asking if it's a classic or if it's a great film. For fans of Tron, this will most likely age gracefully, as did Tron Legacy in the years following its release. And I think Nine Inch Nails' music will cement the movie and guarantee that people will return to this movie for years. Again, my opinion is heavily skewed by the 4DX 3D experience, the theatricality of an insane 2-hour roller coaster music opera. That's really the best way to watch the film. In a dark theater with a huge screen, high-quality speakers blaring Nine Inch Nails, and being flailed about, cued to the in-world action, completely immersed into the personified grid, into our world. As Trent Reznor exclaims throughout the soundtrack, Tron Ares gave me something to believe.